We're getting close to the end of the game, and as a result, getting close to the end of an entire species, which is... that's kind of a sobering thought. Welcome back to AM2R, I guess. Starting this one off on a darker note, I suppose, but whatever works. So, last time we pretty much finished up any business we have in the game's major areas. From here on out, the areas that we'll be dealing with will be much, much smaller in scope, and more akin to small side paths and just variations on the main tunnels themselves. And just a little bit of continuity for you, that shaft you might have seen cutting through the screen vertically back there, that's actually the elevator that we took down to get power bombs much earlier in Area 4. A nice little bit of continuity, I like it. But as I was saying, we are done with all of the major areas in the game. There is no more item hunting to be done, although we still have one more pickup to get, and we'll get to that. We are a fully kitted out Samus, and all we have left are the game's few remaining Metroids and enemies that, as you can clearly see, do not stand much of a chance against us anymore. So, this is an interesting part of the game because it's very slow. But I don't think that slowness works against the game at all. I think it actually works great as a sudden pace breaker, because you've been going through all the major areas up to this point like bang, 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 and there might have been a bit of a slowdown in between areas 3 and 4 with finding the remains of the research team, but areas 4 and 5 did both come pretty quick one after another, and I guess you could count GFS Thoth as a slow part of the game, but A, it's a side area that's optional, and B, it has more blatantly going on with the background and context of it. But on to what we're doing here. We've killed the Metroid for this area, so I guess it's just time for us to head back. Huh. Well, that's different. And on top of that, there's another Metroid in the area, which is probably not a good sign. I'm sure it's nothing too important. Let's just head on back and see if there's anything we missed, I guess. I mean, it's not a big area, and sure enough, looks like a portion of the ceiling fell out, so let's just move along then. Yeah, there's only one Metroid around here, so whatever's going on up here we can probably deal with. I mean, wait a minute. Does that sound what I think it is? The Omega Metroid. Easily the most dangerous of all of the evolutions, which, you know, is probably something you would expect, given that it is the final one after all. This thing does not fuck around. I'm just putting it bluntly here. This thing will absolutely destroy you if you are not prepared for what it can do, and you won't be, your first time fighting it at least. But it's not as bad as it could be. For instance, in the 1.0 version of this game, they did a lot more damage with basically all of their attacks, and they even had more health that you had to shave down. So, there are two things to talk about the Omegas right away. The first is that every single one that you encounter, there is a safe spot for them where you will never be hit by any of their attacks. And this spot is always the entrance of the room. You can just hang out there if things get too close for comfort, and you will be fine. The second thing to bring up is that opening in their back whenever they do a lunge, for instance. If you hit a missile in that spot, it does an insane amount of damage to them. In 1.0, 5 supers to the back would kill them. In 1.1, the version I'm playing, 3 to the back will take them out. However, the catch is that hitting them there is pretty tricky. This is a reference to the original game where hitting an Omega Metroid from behind actually did increase damage to them there as well. Although whether or not it was intentional in the original game is up for debate. sworn I just heard something, but, maybe I'm imagining things. Either way, there's a couple things to talk about. First is these soldiers. You might have noticed that they had a very, very specific color scheme to them. These guys were a quite literally last-minute addition to the game, and, yes, they are in fact a subtle nod to a game everyone knows and loves, Federation Force. Now, I'll say right up front, I've never played Federation Force, but I would like to at some point in the future and, keep an open mind about it. The sprites for the GF Troopers were created by Steve Roethlisberger, also known as Saber230, a member of AM2R's development team and a big reason why you're seeing a lot of the custom graphics that you do throughout this game. As I understand it, they weren't originally created for any sort of purpose, but then Doc was like, yo, could we do this? Is that a thing we could do? At least, that's what I've gathered from the developer livestream that exists out there on the internet. If this game interests you at all and you want to hear a little bit more from some of the developers on just how things came together and some decision making and all that, I would highly recommend checking it out. I'll leave a link in the description for it because it's I would consider a valuable piece of this game's history, hearing the developers talk more at length about it while playing it. Now, there is a save point in here, but in total honesty, there's one not too far from here, so we'll just be using that one before we end things off. I would like to touch more on the slowness of this part of the game, though, because I sort of started up earlier at the start and then got sidetracked by things actually happening. Namely, why I think this part of the game being kind of slow is to its benefit. As I've said before, we've just come off of all of the really big, fast parts of the game. We've been through all of the major areas, we've gotten every single item that we can, we've seen pretty much everything there is to see that this game will ever throw at us. So for the final stretch, they chose to keep things calm. Things are quiet. There's not very much that's really threatening to us. There's nothing much that's happening visually or environmentally. Until you get here. And suddenly, the quiet, slow atmosphere that we've been seeing for the past few minutes takes on an entirely new form. Almost everything is dark. Anything that's not dark is this sickly green color that just kinda doesn't feel comfortable to look at, if I'm being honest. There are no enemies, save for these tiny creatures just giving off a little bit of light to the environment. And above all else, the most disturbing and most telling thing about this place is that this is where the Omega Metroids thrive. In this dark, disgusting hole where almost nothing else is capable of living. We are deep into SR388. And next time on AM2R, we're going to hunt down the last of the Metroids. See you guys then.